becomes solid. Press it. The white light will become solid.
Yes.
Yep. So it takes about 10 seconds. And then press it, and it'll come red. And there you go.
All right. Thank you for having me this evening. I'm John Voberil, Senior Planner for the Community Development Department. This is an informational presentation on the Inglewood Walkin Wheel Master Plan update. So a little bit of background. I've been with the city for 20 years, and when I first started, I noticed that there was a very rudimentary bicycle route system in Inglewood that had one east-west route on Dartmouth connecting both sides of Denver through Inglewood, and one north-south route along Sherman and then off to Shenango and then down to Windermere, connecting Denver and Littleton, and that was it. And that had been developed in the 1970s, and nothing had been done since. So I got working with a Public Works member, and we created a much more comprehensive bicycle master plan. And we were able to get a big grant to sign all of our bicycle routes during the Great Recession. And at that point, I realized, oh no, I need a new master plan. I've completed my master plan, and now I need a new one. But I need one that's more professional. So I was able to find an opportunity out there where I was able to get a $100,000 grant from the Kaiser Permanente Foundation. And it was totally free. There was no match. It was great. And I was able to hire a professional consultant to help us do that. And that plan was approved by City Council in the fall of 2015. The plan emphasis of the plan was on a series of quick win projects that we could do for fairly low amounts of money in a more quick manner. And so they were kind of like low-hanging fruit that were easily implementable projects. They're never as quick as you would like, but we have made some progress since 2015, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Projects were funded basically out of discretionary departmental or grant dollars, and so if we had some extra money in our budget that wasn't appropriated to something else, then we would hire our consultant to do some design work for a certain corridor, and then we typically go out and look for some grant dollars to implement that in the real world. However, recently, and I think this is a good thing, is that a number of city council persons have really gotten behind the concept of the Walkin Wheel program and want to see it go a little bit faster. And so they moved to dedicate a capital improvements funding stream in the capital improvements program. Now, one of the things that the city manager, I think, has run into is that we didn't really have a really good handle on how much these projects would cost. And so there was a lot of kind of a guessing of how much money we should appropriate each year. And so that was causing Sean a little bit of problems. And so he came to us and asked us that to do this Walkin Wheel update. And with the main caveat was to try to get some handle on the cost so that we could do a better job of more accurately programming the line item in the CIP. Let's just talk about a little bit about the existing conditions and the projects we have completed. Since 2015, we've done a Broadway mid-block crossing downtown. Clarkson Street was our first project, and that's on the border of Cherry Hills Village, and the street was scheduled for a new overlay, and so that gave us a good opportunity to work with Cherry Hills Village to do some sharrows. Dartmouth Avenue was probably the one project that was really crying out for a long time from the public that really needed attention. And we've gotten on Dartmouth Avenue a shared bicycle parking lane facility right now. We've also been able to add bicycle parking at Inglewood Station and Oxford Station. We've redone the Harvard Gulch Trail, which is up in northwest Inglewood, moving an old asphalt trail to a concrete standard path. Little Dry Creek Trail crossing at the South Platte River. There is improvement there, a safety improvement done to that crossing. The Mary Carter Greenway has been expanded recently on the east side from Union Avenue to Oxford Avenue. Oxford Avenue, we've been able to put some really nice bike lanes there in the last year or two. And then just more recently, we worked with the city of Denver to do Zuni Street in northwest Inglewood. We share a border with Denver on either side of the street. Denver's on the west side, we're on the east side, from Evans down to Dartmouth, and that is a buffered bicycle lanes, and I'll have a picture of that later on. And then Windermere Street, we have just recently extended bicycle lanes up from the Bellevue Park area up to Tufts, and then it continues on with sharrow markings up to Kenyon. And here are some pictures of some of these improvements. On the left there, you see the Broadway mid-block crossing, and that was a long time in the making. We worked a long time ago, started working with our Public Works Department, probably at least 10 years ago. Took them on some field trips to some other communities in Colorado to see similar crossings like this. But it really took off when business started really improving downtown, and a new housing project took off on the west side, and the business community really started pushing for it, and that's what got us to go ahead and appropriate the funds for that project. And then the middle photo is Oxford Avenue, and these are our new bicycle lane project there. This is the approach towards Broadway, coming from the west to the east. And you can see there that there's a transition zone that tells automobiles to expect bicycles in this pathway, and kind of marks where they're supposed to cross over to get into the right turn lane. And then finally on the right side, we have the Dartmouth project as well. Bicycle lanes there as well. And we have some projects in progress currently. We have our Public Works Department was able to get some grant dollars for safety improvements to West Dartmouth Avenue. And so we will be also at the same time trying to implement some bike lanes between Zuni Street and South Platte River Drive. And that will be able to extend our whole Dartmouth corridor, which is currently from University of Inca, and then across Santa Fe using the Little Dry Creek bike path. And then it will be able to extend farther west to our border there with Denver, and hopefully Denver can pick that up in a few years later, especially with the new development there. What is it? Loretto Heights. Hopefully they can pick that up in the future. And then we have the middle pictures, West Floyd Avenue from Inca Street to Broadway. And once again, the Public Works Department has captured some safety improvement dollars. And we have had engaged with a consultant to do some design work there a number of years ago. And so that will feature kind of a road diet, especially for that portion of Floyd Avenue from Eladi to Broadway. As you may know, it's 4 lanes today, but doesn't cover that extensive amount of traffic. And We believe that we can cut down to 1 lane each way and then create a really nice dedicated separated bicycle facility that has a nice buffer to it. And then the third picture at the bottom is Old Hampton Avenue. This is a much bigger project because instead of just modifying an existing street segment, what we're trying to do is actually rebuild the whole street. And so this is a much higher dollar project, but Public Works has put out an RFP just recently for this corridor for 30% design work. And then finally, we also will be starting construction, I believe, this year on the rail trail pedestrian bridge over Oxford Avenue. The rail trail is a trail that parallels the light rail line all the way from Big Dry Creek all the way up to Bates Avenue, and includes pedestrian bridges over Oxford, Hampton, and Dartmouth. And we decided to start with the Oxford Avenue project because there's quite a bit of conflict with the the new apartments that lie to the south of Oxford, and Oxford is very wide, and it's also a very a tight, congested kind of intersection that's very close to Santa Fe. And so we thought that should be our first project in the whole rail trail system. So let's talk about the project goals for the Walkin Wheel update. Number one, we wanted to identify and summarize our successful projects to date to make sure everyone knows that we have made a lot of progress. We also wanted to then analyze, screen, and prioritize all of our outstanding projects that haven't been completed yet. I want to just caveat that does not include the rail trail bridges or rail trail segments that are programmed as separate items in our capital improvements program. They already have been accounted for. So this is for the more of the projects that have not been accounted for in the past. We wanted to engage the Inglewood Transportation Advisory Committee and the Planning and Zoning Commission and others, such as yourselves, in the planning process. And then we also wanted to gather input from Inglewood citizens. And then the most important goal was to develop planning level cost estimates for the city. In terms of outreach, we had our consultants attend the Inglewood Block Party on September 18th. They had a little bit of a booth there, and they were able to engage 50 different individuals about the Walkin Wheel plan update at that event. We also held joint Planning and Zoning Commission and Transportation Advisory Committee meetings September 21st and October 14th. We had a City Council study session on November 22nd. And then we also conducted a web page survey between November 5th and 19th. And I would just want to shout out kudos to our communications team because they were the ones who pushed this out through all of their social media outlets, and it really brought in a lot of response that we were really amazed. We had over 340 responses to the survey. So what did the survey say? The takeaways from the consultant were these, that they went through all of these comments and they thought that this is what they mostly were hearing, is existing bicycle network is not comfortable for most residents. The facilities tend not to be continuous, and there's a lot of barriers that result in circuitous and very high stress routes. The existing network can be confusing to navigate due to few wayfinding signs. And there's a strong desire for more dedicated bikeway facilities. And finally, most people did agree that the focus should really be mostly on improving bicycling and walking within major activity centers. And then I also had my own takeaways going through all of that, the responses. I think Dartmouth, what I saw was a lot of kudos for Dartmouth being much better than it was originally, but also we also heard that the city needs to keep moving towards separated facilities and shouldn't just stop there, and that the goal really needs to be a total separated project where we have, we don't share the lane with parked cars. And we think we can get there eventually. That there are some places on the corridor where there is parking is utilized. But at the time, we wanted to kind of get the project in place, and we thought that that parking issue would be better off if we waited in the future a little bit. So we kind of wanted to get that quick win going. We've also heard that share markings are generally people are not really fond of them. They mentioned Clarkson Street. They feel that there's quite a bit of traffic on Clarkson, which there may be more traffic on that street than most local streets. And it might be a little bit faster because there's no parking on the Cherry Hills Village side of the street. And so they don't feel that comfortable with that. And so they'd really like to see, I think, on a street like that, bicycle lanes instead of share markings. And we also heard about the current condition of the Little Dry Creek Trail west of Acoma Street. And this picture on the left, it kind of demonstrates what the situation there. Coming from the bottom of the picture, we have a nice path that crosses Broadway, and then it dumps you out there in the plaza area down to the lower part where it starts orange. And that's the point where it's like people aren't sure where they're supposed to go. There's really no direction there. This is the path that was intended by the designers. It can be a bit narrow along 285. Then it kind of comes up Cherokee, and you're supposed to cross the light. And then there is a really nice wide path that they built in terms with City Center Inglewood that then parallels Inglewood Parkway, then crosses at the lights and goes up that's Elati, and then over to the sound wall on Floyd, and then you're supposed to go on the other side of the sound wall and then connect into the trail. And unless you're from this community, you probably aren't going to figure that out very well. And then also, the other thing that also we have to take into appreciation is that there are people out there who feel apprehension regarding changes to streets in general. We really, in this process, really couldn't pinpoint exactly how streets will necessarily change. We need to go through a planning design process. But there's a lot of people who are a little bit leery about things like, I really value my parking space in front of my house. And so we have to keep that in mind as well and that's why we really need to spend the time and the effort to engage the community when we're planning these kinds of projects. All right, so in the Walkin Wheel process, the first thing was to then go ahead and identify all of our outstanding projects, and that project list was compiled from the 2015 Walkin Wheel Master Plan, as well as the 2019 South Platte Connection Study, which is a study which was done by Arapahoe County, and it looked at the South Platte River corridor from Denver down to Douglas County, and looking at ways to make connections much more feel more safe and more efficient, getting communities from either side of the river to that Mary Carter Greenway pathway. And then also we took into consideration public input, and there's 53 projects that were identified. All 53 projects were taken through level 1 screening, and the level 1 screening looked at overall project costs and ease of implementation. And projects that were deemed as being high cost, high complexity were then set aside. And so the remaining projects were then taken through level 2 screening, and they were divided into tier 1 versus tier 2, with tier 1 projects considered to be the highest priority. Then the analysis looked at a number of different factors, including connectivity, looking to improve connections to key destinations, as well as improving access to transit. And it scored each project on that kind of in a somewhat subjective way, but I think, through a knowledgeable way as well, rating them from, 4 as a substantial connection to 1, not really any change. And then cost was also considered, with low cost projects giving more points and highest cost projects giving the least. Demand was also taken into account, response to stakeholder input and community input, as well as does the project fall within the 15-minute city boundary. And just a little bit on the 15-minute city boundary. Basically what this is something, kind of a fairly new planning concept that looks to identify key activity centers within your city and develop 5-minute walk sheds and 15-minute bicycle sheds around those activity centers. And so if a project fell within one of those walk sheds or bicycle sheds, it got additional points. We also looked at ease of implementation, particularly right-of-way impacts and parking impacts, and whether the project would require multi-agency coordination. We also looked at equity, as well as safety and comfort. Does it reduce vehicle-pedestrian conflicts, and does it reduce levels of traffic stress for bicyclists? And let's shift gears just a little bit to talk about the facility types that we are envisioning in this plan. On the right-hand side here, upper right, we have an old school striped bicycle lane. Something that's a little bit newer on the lower picture there on the right is what is known as a buffered bicycle lane. And that is a picture of Zunai Street. And as you can see, the buffered bicycle lane gives a little bit more cushion there, a little bit of space, more additional space between the actual lane and the travel lane, creating a little bit more comfort there for bicyclists. And then finally, these two pictures to the left are the neighborhood bikeway type of improvements. And these improvements tend to not rely so much on bicycle lane markings. Instead, they rely more on traffic calming elements. And the idea here is to create these traffic calming elements that actually will help slow down automobiles on these streets, and in that way make them more safer and feel more safe for bicyclists. And so in the right-hand picture, we have a small traffic circle. A car can't just shoot through that intersection. It's got to slow down and make its way around that turning movement. And then on the left-hand side, this is another type of treatment where the street is narrowed. There are these kind of bollards or posts that are installed to really grab the driver's attention, to make them slow down, to also make them aware that something I need to pay attention to something here at this corner. Now, these projects the cost estimates for these projects vary a lot. These are cost estimates that are based on project miles. So this is a per mile cost basis. So for striped bicycle lanes, that's the cheapest thing on our menu. Planning cost is $3,500 per mile, with a design cost of $5,000 per mile. Construction cost of $41,500 per mile, with a total cost of $50,000 per mile. Buffered bicycle lanes are a little bit higher. They kind of add just a little more complexity, a little more paint, and that gets you up to a total cost of $75,000 per mile. And then the neighborhood bikeway projects are quite a bit more expensive. They are on an order of $350,000 per mile. Because they're doing a lot more physical type of improvements to the streets. Now you may ask, well, why are we going to do these more expensive projects? Well, there's quite a number of streets in Englewood that are going to be kind of narrow, and if we put bicycle lanes on them, it probably would necessitate taking a lot of parking away. And certain streets we just don't think that's going to be a good idea for that neighborhood, and so we probably are going to need to go more to this neighborhood bicycle route. And then, of course, we have a shared use path, which is an off-street bicycle trail, like Little Dry Creek, and that's a lot more expensive. That's $1 million plus per mile. So this is the results of the analysis. This is our Tier 1 priority projects. Our highest scoring project was the Sherman Street corridor with 41 and 39 points. We kind of broke it into smaller segments that we could implement over time. The second highest scoring corridor was the Alati and Fox Street corridor as well. And this really works well with the existing projects we've implemented. We've implemented a lot of east-west projects like Oxford and Dartmouth, and now we need some more projects going north and south. And so that really works out well for us. And then we also have some Tier 1 priority projects that are wayfinding projects. That's the next one here. So we'd like to do some signage projects on Big Dry Creek, as well as Inglewood Parkway and Old Hampton Avenue, and the Mary Carter Greenway and Inglewood Station. And those are, as you can see on the right, those are very inexpensive projects that we can probably do next year, in the next 1 or 2 years. And so to take the top takeaways from our analysis is these are our top priorities that we think we're going to be looking at in the next 5 years. They would be the Sherman Street corridor, the Alati Fox Street corridor, Floyd Avenue east of Broadway. We think that's a fairly low cost, pretty easy project to do. We can extend our West Floyd project all the way to University. And then the Big Dry Creek wayfinding and the Inglewood Parkway Little Dry Creek and Old Hampton wayfinding project, and the Inglewood Station and Mary Carter Greenway wayfinding project. Our adoption schedule, we have a Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing scheduled for February 23rd. And then it will go then to City Council, and they will have a public hearing on March 21st. And then they will vote on a final resolution for adoption on April 4th, 2022. If you have additional questions or comments on the presentation that you've seen this evening, or just in general about bicycling and walking in general, my name is John Voberil. You can reach me at 303-783-6820, and my email is jvoberil@inglewoodco.gov. And some other information of interest. I've been asked to promote this event. Community Development is working on a new development code update for the city, which hasn't been updated since 2004. And this project is called Code Next. And we have had some study sessions with our consultant and Planning and Zoning Commission, about half a dozen of those. And so they have set some direction there. And now we're ready to embark on our community outreach phase. And that kicks off on Thursday, February 17th from 6 to 8 p.m. here at the Inglewood Civic Center. And for more information, please check out the Inglewood Engaged page at www.engaged.inglewoodco.gov/codenext. And at this point, I will unshare my screen, hopefully. Just yank this out. Okay. There you go.
Thank you.
And I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
I have some. So the costs you gave for installing the neighborhood bikeway and the shared use path, that's as if you're starting with nothing and you're putting a path in? Or is it just if you're adapting an existing path?
So the shared use path, that cost is for a brand new shared use path, a brand new concrete path that would be off of a street. And that is, yeah, I was surprised how expensive that was too. And then the bicycle neighborhood bikeways, so we're talking about those little traffic circles, those bollards. There's some other types of traffic calming elements that might divert traffic one way or the other to get off that street. And that will be concrete. And once again, that's expensive stuff. And so it's kind of a little bit pricier too.
On the subject of high cost projects, high cost, high complexity, it looks like this update was going for quick wins. What do you do about the higher cost, higher complexity projects that maybe are super important but didn't meet the screening criteria?
Yes, I think there's two pathways there. Sometimes you just have to, the city just has to bite the bullet and program dollars towards that. And I think that's been done with the rail trail. That has been prioritized. It's big dollars. The other pathway is grants. Lots of looking for opportunities from grants. And then, sometimes there might be an opportunity with CDOT as well, particularly when you're dealing with a highway like Hampton. They have much deeper pockets, and because they control the street, I think that's where we need to partner with them so that they're paying for the bulk of it. So yeah, those are the kind of the two pathways. Is sometimes the city will have to find the money. There's going to have to be a strong commitment to do it. And I think with the rail trail there has been, and some of the, and maybe through this process, some of that other stuff will come along too. I was really looking for I applied for a grant, not this last fall, or maybe it was summer, I can't remember anymore, but it was for Inglewood Parkway and Little Dry Creek, and it was a big planning grant. And I missed out on it. It was a fairly limited amount of money from DRCOG, and I missed out on it by 0.2 points, unfortunately.
Oh man.
Yeah. So, but we keep looking.
And so if those bigger projects aren't in the Walkin Wheel plan, where do they live? How do they get planned or prioritized?
Well, so there's still all the projects, all 53 projects are still in the original Walkin Wheel plan. And this is a kind of an update exercise. So the Walkin Wheel plan is not being replaced. This is just an addition to it. And this is just to kind of help, helps prioritize the small money that we have currently in that line item. And you're right, it's really, the amount of money that we have in there is really geared towards something that's pretty quick and easy. But maybe if we get some more support, and maybe there could be a movement to get to increase that budget some more, and then it can happen faster as well.
And if I could weigh in a little bit from a council perspective, there are several of us, probably a majority on council, that really do want to invest serious money in bike lanes and walkability and traffic calming measures and all of that. And we had several times during the budget process when we were doing the capital improvement plan, this came up, and we were putting $5 million in the capital improvement plan. And we're just like looking at this, going, okay, what can we take out to put more Walkin Wheel stuff in there? And it's like, okay, well, we have this Dartmouth Bridge project. We probably don't want to, not repair our bridges to build a bike lane, And we're kind of banging our heads against the wall trying to figure out where can we find the money. And then we did end up finding some money from, the ARPA funds and the unassigned fund balance in some different ways. So they're, hopefully as, while the economy remains strong and we end up with bigger, dollar amounts at the end of the year, we can take some of that extra money in the unassigned fund balance and pump it into some of those bigger projects. Because I think and something that was also in the Walkin Wheel plan update was a study of 15-minute city. And to me, this is a huge sustainability issue here, because if you can set up your city so anybody can walk to a grocery store within 15 minutes safely, or bike there in 5 minutes, you're reducing, you could potentially reduce emissions, especially if you can create a culture around walking and biking and those kind of things. And one of the big ways you can do that is by doing these neighborhood bikeways that also entail traffic calming measures that make it more frustrating to drive and more enjoyable to walk. And then also the other thing that jumped out at me with the Walkin Wheel plan update was with the 15-minute city. We can see where we have a big hole right in the middle of the city where there's no access to a grocery store within 15 minutes. Most of the city is covered for most things in those 15-minute maps. But there are some areas where beyond just looking at upgrades to Walkin Wheel, we can look at, okay, what amenities do we need to provide to make things closer to where people are all, to encourage walking all the more.
Right. What are the plans for the bike path through city center connecting Little Dry Creek to the Platte? I mean, I saw how it was like 7 turns and you'd never find your way. And now that city center's being redesigned, what are the opportunities for more direct path?
Oh, good questions. Yeah, there's a reason why that it is the way it is and hasn't, and this has been an issue for 20 years since I've been here. And when I first started, there was a consultant who looked at about I think it was 8 or 9 different alternatives. But at the time, the Public Works Department, which is totally different than it is now, they had created this project as it was, and they were kind of invested in it and really didn't want to. They just weren't. Their heart wasn't in it. They thought it was just fine the way it was, and there wasn't really a lot of any excess money, and it is expensive. So it didn't go anywhere. I think that the environment that we're in is a lot different. But the money is still an issue. But we won't give up. I'll keep my nose to the ground, trying to sniff out more opportunities. And we may have some more opportunities now that we have this Downtown Development Authority in place. They will have quite a bit of command of some resources through TIF funding, and that may help drive a lot of projects in that downtown area.
How does the rebuild of the interchange there at Hampton and Broadway, is that going to affect any of these paths like the Little Dry, and can we tie in a little better, or?
Yeah, so our bicycle consultant was on the team that was looking at the design for that new bridge. So I don't know if you are aware of this, but it is going to have some effect on our Sherman Street corridor. CDOT wants that Sherman Street to be closed, which I'm sad to see that, but we've kind of have plans in there for a workaround where people can jump off of Sherman Street and get onto that Little Dry Creek path, cross the creek and onto the other side, and then get back up on Sherman Street. So yes, we are taking that. It will have an effect, and we are trying to mitigate that as best we can.
And then also, how fast is the rail trail bridges going to be implemented? I mean, you're starting at Oxford. When's the Hampton and the Dartmouth ones projected?
Well, the good news about the Hampton one is that we have a number of PUDs that are housing PUDs that are located on this side of Hampton. And we have been able to get the developers to make contributions to that bridge. And so I think I would like to see, I can't speak for Public Works because it's kind of in their wheelhouse, but so they have just finished that Oxford design, and I would like them to see, hopefully that they will start, now that they're done with that design, move on to this Hampton Avenue Bridge.
Right.
So one thing that has been very close to my heart is trying to get pollinator pathways along the bike roads. And, being at Depot Park all the time, I'm always looking at all the bikers going by, and you showed a picture of that. And I, as I walk around Englewood, I'm always seeing where there could be more landscaping, that like where there is turf that is maintained with a lot of water and mowing and carbon footprint that nobody uses, and especially when it's along a bike path, and it could be very beneficial habitat. And we really need, in light of the city council's pollinator proclamation, I'd like to, find opportunities to work together to get some pollinator corridors.
That's a really cool comment.
And-
I think, that sounds like something that, should be taken into consideration when we're designing these intersection improvements and trying to use, especially look at that little circle. Could that be planned?
Exactly. I looked at that and was like,
Yeah.
make that pretty.
Right.
And it's a way to increase bike traffic, make it more appealing to ride your bike. And I would like, especially along Dartmouth from the Mary Carter Greenway into the city, if that's a really beautiful and has educational signage, I think it's a way to make Englewood a destination for bike riders.
Yeah, we've heard that I was at the Englewood Chamber doing this kind of presentation, and that was very an interest from the business community is that they'd like to try to tap into some of that bicycle traffic to come in, have a bite to eat or a drink,
Exactly.
and then on their way. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk more about that.
What about Tufts? I was curious, Tufts East West seems like another street where it's fairly wide and there's very little parking because all the houses are on the north-south streets, not on the east-west streets. Is that one you guys looked at?
Tufts?
Tufts for a bike lane?
Yes, that's one of the projects, and I believe I think it's a little bit lower on it, but it is in the tier 1 priority section. Quincy is kind of like that too.
Uh-huh,
Yeah.
right, cool, good, I didn't see it on there. And what about Oxford east of Broadway? The bike lane west of Broadway is awesome, but east of Broadway, it also seems like one of those opportunities where the street's fairly wide and there is parking allowed, but there's not many cars there.
Right. That's probably something also that based on what we've heard about how people are not super thrilled about share markings.
Yeah, exactly.
Is something that may need to be revisited. But of course, we probably would need to do one of those kind of parking studies and then try to get a sense of what that pattern is and which side of the street we probably would be able to keep parking on one side and then probably remove on the other side and then figuring out which side is best for that. Yes, there's an opportunity there as well.
Is there anything the Sustainability Commission or ETAC or anyone else needs to do to get those types of projects under consideration? Since it seems like this is pretty well formed, pretty solid at this point, the Walkin Wheel plan.
Well, I'd say obviously the one thing that says I did try to plug the public hearings. That's always great to come to city council and tell them that you're behind this, or even contact your city council member. I would keep an eye on the Transportation Advisory Committee as well and see what they're doing and trying to lend support there as well. So I think people have been doing this a pretty good job of it, and they just need to keep doing it, keep letting their representatives know that this is important.
Hey Joe, it's important.
Thanks, guys. We'll find it. In terms of the pollinator kind of strip or garden that Dana mentioned, what are some ways that they wanted that they could advocate for that as the process moves forward?
So those corridors, those neighborhood bikeway corridors are going to require full-blown community planning processes. And so I think that when you see that, and we'll be advertising far and wide using our communications department, yes, come to those meetings and share those ideas with the design consultant.
Anything else? Okay. Here's the one that we've all been waiting for, the
It's me.
composting.
And Tim, you said I have to connect also. Or is
Yeah, if you could share it on your, so is your Teams app open or no?
So is it?
If not, I can pull it up. I could just, yeah, there you go. And then just, so join now. And then, yeah, keep your speakers muted, but share it next to the leaf. But yeah, there you go.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, so I am going to have a relatively brief presentation about composting. So what it is, where we are now, and maybe some proposed next steps around it too. So what is composting? I feel like everyone in this group would probably be really knowledgeable about what composting is, but just in case you need a refresher, composting is the natural process of recycling organic matter into a valuable fertilizer that can enrich soil and plants, and it has a slew of benefits, but some include reducing the waste stream that is sent to the landfill, which then also helps reduce methane emissions from that landfill, and methane is a greenhouse gas significantly more potent than CO2. It also helps improve soil health by lessening erosion, and then it also conserves water by helping soil hold in that moisture and reduce water runoff. So what does composting look like in other cities, namely other cities in Colorado? So in the city of Denver and Boulder, they both have curbside or they both have municipal compost as an option. They use A1 Organics. The city of Louisville, they have composting available to their residents, and they use Republic Services, and they also use them for their trash and recycling. And then the city of Longmont also has recycling, and I'm fairly certain that it's part of their internal waste services, which is pretty interesting. And then if we want to look a little bit outside of Colorado, which I mean, Colorado's the best, why would we? But I think it should come to know, should shock nobody that San Francisco, California is the top composting city in the US. Apparently the city has reduced their amount of trash that they send to the landfill by 80%. And they compost 255,500 tons of organic material each year. So current composting options in Englewood, and again, I am a newbie to Englewood, so if I missed something, please let me know. But it looks like there is Wampost, Women-Owned Composting, they service Englewood, Compost Colorado, and A1 Organics, which I'm missing that Z there, but they have a location right at our neighbors in Sheridan. Currently, the city itself does not have any programs around composting, but that could always change. And then, so that kind of leads really well into the single hauler composting. And I watched the, I believe it was December 2021 Sustainability Commission meeting, and it looks like you all kind of talked about it a little bit. And not much has changed. So according to Maria DeAndrea, the Director of Public Works, composting was included in the RFP for single haulers for trash and recycling as an optional service that they could propose on, and neither of the companies who submitted a proposal did so. So the idea going forward is to issue a separate RFP for composting if there's enough interest from the public in supporting that service. And I'm going to touch on that again a little bit here. So how can Englewood encourage individual composting? So education and outreach is going to be a really great way to do this, and this can be done in a host of different ways. So workshops, webinars, infographics, posters, maybe social media campaigns, and even just as simple as conversations with your neighbor, I think could be really effective. And then maybe other options could be pilot programs, maybe in schools, city government buildings, somewhere along the community. And then to
wrap things up, so possible next steps for the commission. One could be helping to craft 1 to 2 questions around community-wide composting on an upcoming survey that's going to be going out to community members around single hauler. And then another option is helping to coordinate education and outreach events around composting. There actually is a national day to learn about composting, which is May 29th. So maybe that could be kind of like a kitschy little thing. And then I copy and pasted something from Denver's website. It looks like they have a lot of collaboration with other organizations such as Denver Urban Gardens, where they host kind of free classes to the community to learn about backyard compost. So that could be another option as well. But that really wraps it up for me, and I'm happy to field any questions, probably with a lot of help from my Englewood expert, Tim. But yeah.
Yeah, and this was really, so it did obviously come up now at 2 council meetings, and this being an advisory committee to council on topics such as this, so that it would be the right venue to have an initial discussion. And certainly there could be next steps, and we could talk about it at future meetings as well, based on what the commission wants to do.
And this is Patty Meek. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's what, you know, Kathy and I'm speaking for her a little bit, but that's why we're here, is to add people power and support and help move this forward with the composting.
And this is Dana speaking. I'm not on camera, but I'm here. Patty, do you and Kathy have specific ideas about thoughts about how you want to implement this or support it?
You know, we do not, Jen. What we've talked about is, you know, educating people, going around, passing out flyers, doing that kind of stuff. But we really didn't talk any further about that because we wanted to talk with the sustainability people first to see where the whole composting thing was at that time.
Hi, this is Kathy. I'm sorry, could you tell me your name again?
Me, Dana Liebert.
D-A-N-A?
2 N's, D-A-N-N-A.
Oh, almost like Donna. Okay.
Like Anna.
Okay.
Liebert.
So Dana, if you need any legwork, if you need any help with anything, Patty and I are totally available.
Awesome.
Let me just give you a brief history. We've done several composting seminars over the last 4 or 5 years. We've also done a lot of incentivizing, trying to see what we could get off the ground. There is a distinct minority, but there is quite a composting community here within the Englewood area. And what we need to do is bring them out of the woodwork, so to speak. And as was brought out, we are looking at ways to do more of a community-wide composting effort. And a lot of that's going to be dependent on getting a single trash hauler into and in place. And that could get interesting. We'll know more this year, I think, finally.
And
And
so
it's taken over a year just to get to this point. Go ahead.
help me understand, I mean, if neither, because I've been watching the single hauler Zooms from their meetings too. So if neither one of them has submitted any proposal for composting, how does that impact what we do?
Well, what we're going to have to do is recruit citizens who want to do composting either in their backyard, which a lot of them do, a lot of us do, but we also need to then persuade the city or provide a way for a third party to collect compost, which is where I think Denver is right now. I think they've got a pilot program going. And that is something that we might be able to get off the ground here in the near future, is to get a pilot program of composting going, where you would collect your organic matter and somebody would come around every other week or whatever and collect it and compost it.
So I think there's two issues. There's, promoting residential individual composting that people do in their backyards. And then there's getting a citywide commercial level composter that people could pay to send their composting out to.
Just a couple thoughts. You might want to add to your presentation that Edgewater also has a citywide composting program.
Really?
And also, what about restaurants? I'm sure that they would, well, I know because I talked to 6 of them, would be totally willing to add to the compost, to, provide their scraps. And also at Grow and Gather, they have contracted with Compost Colorado to be a drop-off site. So neighbors around there can bring their compostable material to Grow and Gather, and then Compost Colorado will come pick it up. And then somehow a percentage of that then will be distributed to, I think, the people that contributed.
Well,
And
see, this is the kind of things that we need to get before the public and publicize and move forward, so.
Agreed. I see a lot of those surveys, and every time I see a survey, I take part in it, but I never saw one about composting. So I
Right.
don't know how you presented it, but I never saw it.
Oh, that's a good idea about the restaurants. And I could add some additional context and data on the residential citywide pickup conversations, since those were part of the discussions in single hauler. The first 2 bids that the city got did include compost because it was a requirement as part of the RFP. And there were 2 major haulers that responded to that RFP. And as far as the compost side of things, one of them said it would cost an extra $30 a month per household for compost, and they needed a minimum of 300 households in order to do it. We thought there wouldn't be too many takers at an extra $30 a month. The other proposer said it would be $16 a month, and they needed a minimum of 2,500 households to participate. And I think we saw Englewood had somewhere between 8,000 and 9,000 households total, single family residents. So that would be a little more than a quarter, almost a third of all households would have to participate in order for the program to even happen. So we took it that really wasn't going to fly, at least with those major haulers. And then we also learned, of course, Compost Colorado and the other companies you named already will provide that service for a good deal less. It seems like they were in the range of what, $20 to $25. And so the conversation came up, could the city issue an RFP for perhaps an optional service that would be essentially a bulk discount? And I think that is or was part of the recommendations of the city hauler committee, which itself is still kind of up in the air and trying to wrap up its recommendations. For the second round of RFP, it wasn't a requirement, it was an option that the haulers could propose, and that's where neither of them proposed doing it. So the conclusion is that the smaller private companies seem much better suited, both in terms of price and in terms of their own interest in providing that type of service.
And those who provide that service, do they include in that the people that pay that $16.30 whatever a month get compost back for their gardens?
Those private companies like Conservation Colorado, they do. Compost Colorado, they do.
Right.
The big haulers, they did not specify. I would doubt it though.
Yeah, so the big haulers to me sounds like a no. Why would we give you
Right.
if we're not getting anything back? And Compost Colorado, I mean, you know, here's my food scraps.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing that I learned, those prices are only for food waste. If you wanted to do something beneficial with yard waste, leaves, branches, grass clippings, etc., that would be an additional truck they'd send around. It'd be an additional monthly fee, so it'd be an additional $30 a month or $16 a month respectively. And I thought, I know Denver mixes theirs all together, but we got a lesson where it's ideal to keep food waste compost and yard waste compost separate.
And the private companies take both?
I don't know.
Okay. Well,
I mean, it seems to me that the come on for people would be getting, you know, composted material back for their gardens, especially people that garden.
Yeah.
And so I want to just leap in and summarize and make sure that I understand the generals. And this is Patty again. So you guys did a lot of good work trying to get this, you know, with the single hauler and stuff. But the issue was that the $30 per month is cost prohibitive, and they might have gotten the 300 people, but even with the $16, needing 2,500 households didn't seem feasible. Is that
Correct.
exactly? And so when you guys kind of left this, and I'm not saying that you've left it, but when you kind of had to kind of leave it sit for a little bit, did you have further ideas on how to get more people involved, more people on board with this? Because when Kathy and I were at City Council last night, and I know, nice human being that I've never met, that you guys have already walked this road many times. But I noticed at City Council when they saw that there were 3 of us there, that it seemed to make an impression. And so coming back to your group and all the work that you did you have any next steps that Kathy and I could help with?
It was left up in the air. I think the intention was or is that the city would issue an RFP, a separate standalone RFP for compost, and see what kind of prices come back. I might expect they'd be in the $20-something range, and then we'd have to evaluate, is that worth it? Could we get enough people interested to make it worth it? And is that something that would go on your water bill, or you'd probably more likely pay the company directly, so it would essentially just be a bulk discount. So I think the next steps would be to ask the city to pursue that RFP if it's something you're interested in, though with the single hauler issue itself being more up in the air, it's probably a slightly lower priority. But for what it's worth, the committee and the city got a number of comments about single hauler, and I guess at least a quarter of them were specifically saying we'd like compost to be a part of it. So it's on people's radar.
I'd like to,
When we were at City Council last night, I didn't know about you and all you had done. And I said, you know, can we put together an ad hoc committee to look at this? And we were told, you know, it's a grassroots effort. Let us know if you need any help. And that's all we got.
Well,
So I don't think they're looking at anything.
Well, was that Kathy speaking?
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
It's okay. Kathy, it's Dana again. So I'm all for the grassroots stuff, and the three of you can make a lot happen. And what I'm thinking is there's an opportunity with if the, whatever, the community outreach, community development staff in the city, if they're doing those block parties and community gatherings this year, I don't know if they are, but if they are, it seems like a great opportunity to piggyback on that with community education and supporting it on a residential level. You know, while we wait for a bigger city program.
Right. And that's what, and your name is Dana, correct?
Yeah.
And Dana, that's kind of what I was thinking about last night as I drove home. You know, when you have candidates that are running for office, people have little, you know, meetings at their homes and stuff like that. And so, Dana, I don't want to take up everybody's time on this nice group of people. Are you comfortable, like, letting Kathy or I have your contact information?
Sure. Why not, is there a way to do this? Do I just say it now or what?
Whatever you're comfortable with, you could just send it offline if you're more comfortable with that. Yeah.
Do you, if you email,
You can do it through me if you
yeah,
want. Yeah.
email Tim.
It's tdodd@englewoodco.gov.
What was the
What's that?
first part?
Sorry. Yeah. TDODD.
D-O what?
DODD. Three E's, or 3D, sorry. TDODD@englewoodco.gov.
And
Okay.
you'll give us Dana's information?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He will
Somebody
relay it.
forward it and I'll email you and put your phone numbers and we'll get in touch.
But it's TDODD at
Yep.
englewoodco.gov. That's great. Dana, thank you so much. Everybody, thanks for your patience.
Dana, just real quick, do you have your own committee, your own group? Do you have regular meetings? Or are you just on your own?
So this is my first, I'm part of the Sustainability Commission. This is my very first meeting. So
Mine too.
I'm just speaking also as a citizen who, you know, wanted to do a project with Depot Park and just started doing it. So we can talk after.
That's awesome. Thank you so
Awesome,
much.
awesome.
I thought of one other suggestion. We heard of a number of surrounding cities in the metro area that have a city drop-off site, especially for yard waste. I think it's not so much on the food waste side of things, most of them, but definitely on the yard waste and green waste side, where it's just a city facility and you can come dump your yard waste there for no charge. And that seemed like an easy solution that Inglewood could consider. So maybe that's something you could push for.
Well, I know Inglewood has a leaf
You should be part of it.
drop off, but it can't have any grass clippings.
Yeah, it would be like that, but year round.
Yes, that's one of the things that the commission is gonna have to look at, because the drop-off was practically overwhelmed for the 2 weekends last year. And that is on our agenda to find a way to facilitate that kind of effort. So it's in front of us,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you. We appreciate your participation. Okay, anything else on that? I think we beat that to death. The update on waste and recycling, I think we pretty much touched on that, at least for now. The city strategic planning.
Yeah, I just want to really give a quick update on that. So for those of you who don't know, the city has a strategic plan. It has 7 what we call outcome areas or themes. One of them is sustainability. We are going through kind of a rewrite right now of the strategic plan. Thanks to Christine for some great comments, as well as to the Sustainable Inglewood group for comments. We had a city council retreat almost 2 weeks ago that basically went through kind of at a high level the goals that were included in the plan, as well as feedback that we got from Inglewood Engaged about prioritization. We're going back to council on the 14th, which is this coming Monday, to get their feedback through a study session. We do have a draft item in there related to composting. And so we'll get more feedback from council. Staff will then fine tune it and we'll bring it back to council on March 14th for their approval. If it is approved, it will be set to be basically a 3-year extension. So originally the strategic plan was meant to go from 2020 to 2022. If it is approved, it will go to 2025. What's kind of unique about the sustainability plan is that it's what I call a plug-in plan. So it's a standalone plan, but it's also the sustainability section of the strategic plan. So certainly as you all as a commission delve more into it, you certainly will have ideas on how you want to change it. And those ideas can certainly be proposed as an advisory role through council. So I can make sure that you all get a copy of the draft plan as it currently stands. And certainly if you do have any feedback that you want to share, questions you have, I'm happy to entertain those. One of the biggest changes that we're making is we're adding performance metrics to the plan. The plan as it was originally created was primarily one-time projects. Those are still certainly a part of the plan. We did get some feedback certainly on the sustainability area. One of the big changes that was proposed is moving, one of the goals is food systems. So a proposal that we will be going forward with and proposing to council is moving that to another section, community well-being of the plan. What's really tricky and what we can talk more about another time for sure is, as you probably all are aware, in many cities, my last city where I worked, they would say sustainability was part of the DNA. So they actually did not have a sustainability section. It basically was the hub essentially of the entire plan. So what's been really kind of tricky here is we've done a lot of cross-referencing. So there are things like what John presented on tonight involving transportation, or things that involve community resiliency or business resiliency that live somewhere else in the plan, but that we've cross-referenced. And I know that's something that some folks have had some questions about, and I know it gets a little tricky because there's a lot of parts of the plan that really could fit 3 or 4 or 5 areas in some cases. So thanks to Councilmember Anderson, we do have a table in the back, which we'll be adding to, that really is meant to be the cross-reference sheet. But I know that's something that could come up. So if it's okay with everyone, I could certainly put a more formal update on the March agenda. It will be right before council has a scheduled vote on it, but it will be after they've weighed in at the study session. So we can maybe spend more time going through it then, if that makes sense.
I think that would be a good idea.
Great.
Did you say you would, that we, or when would we see the a draft of this?
I can send it to you tomorrow morning. Yeah.
Awesome.
And that's the updated draft, so. Yeah.
Great.
So it's the original draft that council saw in December, plus comments that we got from the public, city council retreat, council input. We made about 50 or so changes from between then to now. So.
I listened to the city council retreat where they discussed it, and it sounds like they were discussing mostly the broad goals and the framing of it, not diving into each individual project. And from what I heard, they started by saying the goal seemed a bit wordy because it really tried to cover everything, and we all agree that sustainability does and should cover everything, every aspect of what the city does. And then it sounded like there was starting to be agreement towards simplifying it in the order of a city that stewards its resources, something along those lines. But it sounded like it ended up being back broad again towards the end. Was that your understanding as well?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to.
I think this is, we want to be a city that stewards its resources for the present with a view to the future or something to that effect. I don't know if did we add stuff back in after that? I like the really
I liked
short
that a
version.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would prefer the short version, so I
Yeah.
don't know what we find.
Trying to find it, yeah.
But,
I thought that covered the other things,
mhm.
but was just a lot simpler and more elegant.
Yeah, the one we had before was way too
Yeah.
funky.
Yeah.
It
Yeah, it was.
was a first draft.
Right.
Yeah, and there's, I'm sure you've seen them, Christine, there's some definitions out there that are paragraphs, which don't really have, I get the point, but it also confuses, I think, the situation more than it helps it. But
Hey, I just wanted to give you guys a heads up. I need to leave in about 10 minutes, so I'm not quite done. I just wanted to let you know that's why
I'm hoping that we're done.
Dumbo.
I'm gonna
you're gonna make it.
make the agenda that way. Do we have anything else that we need to add for March agenda? Dana?
I would like to talk, well, I feel some time pressure if we're gonna do any landscaping things this year, because we're 2 months from planting. And, even any community initiatives. So could I talk at our next meeting about some ideas? And
Perfect.
maybe just brief overview on why native landscaping is important, because I think it's not so well understood.
Would you like a staff presentation on that, or just kind of an open, so like when John came tonight,
Like
we've had.
PowerPoint?
Well, it doesn't have to be a PowerPoint, but like we've had experts from different departments
Oh.
kind of come and talk. So are you interested in having someone from Parks do a presentation, or do you more just want to
Why
keep
don't
it
you
at
and
a?
I
Okay.
talk about how best to do it? Because there are people, I feel like maybe there are some people from other cities who could talk about water conservation programs that have been really effective, better than I could, but we can figure that out.
Okay, let's leave a block for that. You have to choose a chairman. We're gonna look at some of the, what were we gonna do, the
Strategic plan?
strategic planning. I think you've got enough on your plate. Right there.
It's a record length meeting tonight.
Yeah. My last one is the longest.
Thank you. I thank you, Bob, for your
Thank
service.
you.
Yeah, thank you, Bob.
Okay,
All right, bye,
we
everyone.
will be adjourned. Thanks, John.
Do you want?
Oh, yeah, do you mind passing the notes?
Yeah.
Thanks, Mel.
Meetings are gonna be longer.
Meetings are gonna be longer, gonna get some stuff done.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, lovely ladies.
Oh.
This for you.
Okay.
Here is that.
Okay.
Those are your
we have to
oaths, yeah.
Sign this now.
Miss you, Bob.
Oh, for sure.